For thousands of years, people all around the world have been arguing about what it takes to become a person. Some Africans thought that the Europeans were ghosts, so they couldn't be persons, and some of the Europeans thought that the Africans couldn't be persons because they looked so different, and a lot of people said that the American Indians weren't persons. They seemed so different. Some people have said you're not really a person until you're 6. Others said, no, 10 or 12. And some said, no, 16 or maybe 18. Well, I've been thinking, the way people talk makes it hard for me to tell the difference between a little kid and an adult.
Muy buenas noches. Lección 24 para la primaria superior. Like, sort of. It's a lesson about filler words and kids and adults.
So let's turn on the Max and Max radio, and you can listen while you do whatever else you're doing.
I want you to keep an eye on filler words during the next 10 years and see what happens to some of them. Then you can look back and say you have watched the evolution of certain words. You might even say, yeah, people drive me crazy the way they talk. Have you ever tried to tell the difference between a baby and a teenager? Or a teenager and an adult?
I myself don't spend my time thinking about when a person becomes a person, but I have noticed that if I listen to how people talk, I can tell something about how old they are. But nowadays it's getting harder and harder to tell the difference between an infant, a teenager, and an adult. And this reminds me of a guy I used to work with who talked in a way that made it really hard for me to tell whether he was a grown-up or whether he was still just a baby.
I used to work with a guy named Jim. We were 19. Jim fell in love with another employee. She was 42, old enough to be his mother. After they had been married for a while, Jim told me that when he got home after a day's work, he expected a hot supper to be on the table waiting for him. Now I have to use my baby voice to explain the rest. Because Jim's mommy, his wife, worked at the same store, she had to put in the same amount of time as he did. But he still expected a hot meal when he got home. If his mommy didn't have it ready, then Jimmy would die. He would die of starvation. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between a baby and a married big baby. During the past 10 years, it has become increasingly harder to tell the difference between teenagers and professors, journalists, and intellectuals. This is because they talk so much like each other. The teenagers say "like" all the time. One girl told a newspaper reporter how much she admired a certain Olympic ice skater. She said, "She's like the greatest ever. I just love her. She's like the person I really look up to. I watch her and I'm like, wow, if I could even do a little of what she does. She's amazing. I'm just really blown away by all this." In one paragraph, that girl used the word "like" 7 times. Nowadays, the professors, journalists, and intellectuals talk the same way. Instead of "like," they say "sort of." So, Mr. Ambassador, you must have a comment on the international meeting you've just attended? Yes. It was decided that we have a sort of high-priority conflict. This situation is something we sort of believe must be fixed within a week at most. Do you really think that will happen, Ambassador? Well, yes, I do. This is a problem, and it is one that we sort of recognize as truly a sort of top priority. I recall my high school teachers telling us students to be clear when they asked us to define something. They would say, "Don't tell me what it's like, tell me what it is." Nowadays, lots of teenagers totally leave out the word said. I was like, "Oh my gosh, this can't be happening to me." And he was like, "Get used to it because rules are rules." And I was like, "You've gotta be kidding me. I didn't even know there was a rule." And he was like, "If you drive without a license, you're going to get pulled over." And I was like, "How come nobody told me?" And then I was like, "Who am I trying to fool?" And he was like, "At least they won't put you in prison." And I was like, "No, but my parents are going to kill me." And he was like, "No, they won't, because they'll want you to keep working so you can pay the fine." And I was like, "Oh, great, thanks a lot." Now, imagine a journalist interviewing a teenager. "You attended a sort of spectacular event last night at the Olympics. Did you enjoy the American skater?" "Oh, yeah, she was like the greatest. I was like so impressed." "So you were sort of glued to the action, I take it." "It was like the most fun I've ever seen. All the skaters were like awesome." "Well, I sort of thank you for sort of being here." "You're sort of like welcome, sir." It's so easy to tell which international guests have spent all their time with teenagers after they've been in America studying for a semester or two. They tend to talk English the same way. "It's like really great to be here. I've like had such a good time and I've made so many like good friends." They talk the same way as so many Americans these days. Almost saying what they're saying, but not quite. Just like, or sort of, but not actually saying it. What do we do with these filler words in Spanish? Here's a few examples. I was like, "What is that?" In Spanish, we'd say, "I asked myself, what is that?" He was like, "Who cares?" In Spanish, we'd say, "He said, so what?" The committee has made a sort of decision. In Spanish, we just say the committee made a decision. The house was sort of destroyed by the flood. We just say, the stupid house was destroyed by the stupid flood. You can see I'm getting irritated by these filler words. We can also use the filler word that we saw again in lessons 20 and 21 on NBC words. Este. The word like often has no meaning. It's often just a filler word. Like, sort of. Este. Just as and usually have no meaning. An Argentine professor told a joke about his fellow Argentines. He was like, "How does a dog from Argentina bark?" We were like, "We don't know." "How?" He was like, guau. So, as far as he was concerned, his people were pretty bad about overusing the filler word este. He was a sort of Argentine who, thought that was a funny way to sort of tell the truth about his own people. We were like, "Well, that's kind of funny." And I'm like, keep an eye on filler words during the next 10 years, students, and sort of see where they go. You may sort of get to the place where they drive you crazy. I'm sort of like, ciao.